everybody. I hope you guys all had an absolutely wonderful weekend. I know I did. I wanted to sit in front of you guys on this Sunday night as we get ready to go into the week. Aren't we all so excited? And do my 6th installment of Unhinged Newspaper Stories. So all of the stories that I'm going to be doing today all appeared on the New York Tribune on their issue dated Sunday, April 16th of 1905. Just some background on the New York Tribune. They started as a penny paper by a man by the name of Horace Greeley for the Whig Party. And penny papers were really popular in the 1830s and 40s, but they are exactly what they're called. They were papers that cost 1 cent as opposed to other papers which would have been about 5 or 6 cents at the time. And they were mass produced and also tabloid style papers. But the New York Tribune would go on to become one of the most successful papers in the United States, and they ran successfully until 1924, which is when they merged with the New York Herald. So that is some background on the New York Tribune. There's a lot of material. This was a 60-page paper, so there was just a lot to choose from. A lot of stuff was unhinged. There was like a story about like woman's cruelty towards man. A funny story I saw, which was titled like a ghetto engagement. There was also another one about like, Japanese immigrants coming through San Francisco. So those were, just a couple of the stories. I'm not going to read those specifically, but those all appeared on pages that were on the New York Tribune for this particular issue. So let's go ahead and get started into some more unhinged news stories of the past. So the very first story I'm going to be doing today is of Miss Cassie L. Chadwick, the very notorious con artist from Canada. Just some background before I mention this story. Cassie L. Chadwick is most known for defrauding banks of millions of dollars by pretending to be the illegitimate daughter of Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie is one of the, titans of industry that rose up during the Gilded Age. I did talk about him briefly in my video about, Luigi and Brian and that whole like Eat the Rich video. But just some background, that is how she came into millions of dollars. She was a very, very delusional woman, and even her approach to prison was delusional, because when she was eventually sentenced to prison, she brought bags of goods with her, including photographs, clothing, and even furniture. So her whole approach to prison was very much, I'm gonna make it comfy here. And I'm not gonna lie, I stand a little bit, but let's get into this very first story. So Miss Chadwick expects release, says bail will be deposited within 10 days, amount now $52,000. $52,000 in 1905 is the equivalent of around $1.8 million today. It's $1,864,938.64 today. So, I mean, that's quite a hefty bail, but of course, Miss Chadwick and all her delusion, she knew she was gonna get it. So let's go. Cincinnati, April 15th. Miss Cassie L. Chadwick was today admitted to bail in the sum of $5,000 pending appeal proceedings next October before the United States Circuit of Appeals. Cleveland, April 15th. J.P. Dowley, chief counsel for Miss Chadwick, stated today that the $5,000 bond was in addition to the $47,000 fixed here by the United States District Court and the county criminal courts. The total amount required is therefore $52,000. Miss Chadwick tonight said, arrangements have been made for bail for my release, pending the hearing of the appeal by the Court of Appeals. The surety deposited will be in cash. I fully expect to be released within a week or 10 days at the outside. I have made no plans for the future or as to where I shall go when released, but probably will remain in Cleveland most of the time during the summer or until my case is heard by the higher court. My plans will depend largely upon the condition of my health. So that is Miss, Cassie Chadwick, just saying, she'll be free very soon. Her release and her plans, of course, have nothing to do with the jail system. It's about her health. I will mention that she passed away in 1907, so she was going through, health problems at this time and would eventually succumb to them. But that is Miss Cassie Chadwick and just her pretty delusional approach to prison. I will say her name was actually Elizabeth Bigley. So that is what I found out. She was just a con artist from Canada, but Cassidy Chadwick is her most famous pseudonym. So yeah, let's just start it off there with Miss Cassidy Chadwick and her very, very delusional approach to prison. And on to our next case. And this is for, I guess there's a couple true crime stories I have here, but this is the first of them. And this one is titled New Evidence in Noble Case. Friends supplying funds may be called by prosecution. Miss Josephine Noble will be placed on trial next week for the murder of her husband, Patton Noble, last fall. The prosecution asserts it has discovered new evidence in its favor since Miss Noble was indicted by the Queen's Court grand jury. The prosecution, it is said, will not try to prove that the married life of the Nobles was unhappy, but rely on the fact that 2 shots were fired to convict Miss Noble. The defense counts on proving by the members of the Purcell family who lived on the floor below that there was no quarrel. The case will be tried before Justice Gaynor, who will hold evening sessions until the case is finished. Miss Noble was entirely without funds when she was arrested, and it is said that she has been aided by a wealthy New Yorker who was a friend of her husband and father, and who is firmly convinced of her innocence. The prosecution knows his name, and it is rumored that he may be called in the case. So, new evidence in Noble case. Oh, so I was just reading this, of course, I was just browsing through the stories, but I did actually Google Miss Josephine Noble. I didn't find anything at first, but then I was more specific with my search. I just put in New York 1905, and surprise, surprise, I just happened to run into a New York Times article from April of 1905. I believe it was the 28th, so 12 days later, where it says, jury in 12 minutes acquits Miss Noble, pronounces her not guilty of murder of her husband. She tells her own story. Note handed to Justice Gaynor says one of the jurors knew her before her marriage. So this case already sounds like a mess, but just everything sounds like a mess, but she did get away with it. They deliberated for 12 minutes. And then I'm seeing here that one of the jurors knew her before her marriage. It sounds like a mess anyway. Miss Noble, not sure what happened, but I guess she got away with it, or she didn't, and they just never found the killer. I'm not sure, but she did get away. Well, she was acquitted. She was acquitted by a jury when the trial did finally happen. I was trying to see if I could read the actual New York Times article, but I hit a paywall, unfortunately. But I'm gonna see if I can get more information on this story. But yeah, that's our second story today. So there seems to be, honestly, these are all Unhinged News Stories. That's exactly why I share them. But this one is another level of unhinged, y'all. Get into this. So this is called Stabbed by His Pastor. Discussion over Negro supply may end fatally. So let's go. Lebanon, Indiana, April 15th. The question of inviting a colored minister to occupy the pulpit of the Holiness Church led to a discussion between the members of the congregation at a meeting tonight, in which the Reverend John Doge, pastor of the church, stabbed and fatally wounded Oscar Johnson, one of the members. While the discussion was in progress, Miss Minnie Chambers took exception to remarks made by Mr. Doge and slapped him in the face. Miss Doge attacked Miss Chambers, and the two were engaged in a desperate struggle when Johnson interfered. At this juncture, the Reverend Mr. Doge drew his knife and plunged it several times in Johnson's back. All the parties were arrested and placed under bond. Now tell me that isn't one of the most unhinged stories I've ever shared on here. Imagine being stabbed to death by your pastor. I understand that it was probably a weirdly triggering conversation because it's 1905 and I guess they're talking about inviting a black minister. Who the hell knows? But being stabbed to death by your pastor is crazy work. And then they're all unhinged, very, very unhinged. This is the stories that I do this for. This next one was one that I just thought was really funny, but I'm gonna go ahead and read this. This is called Color of Americans. So, of peasant life in Russia, Jane Addams tells this story. I went with a friend to a peasant home to call on an old lady who was famous among her neighbors because she could read. The common belief was that she had been taught to read by Tolstoy. It seems that years before, Tolstoy had given her a few lessons in reading, but she had forgotten most of the little that she had learned. However, she was fond of telling her friends marvelous stories about people in other lands, of whom she said she had read in books. One of these stories was that Americans were black. So, when we were presented, one of her friends asked, "Why these ladies are not black and they come from America? How is this? You told us Americans were black." The old lady was disconcerted for a minute and then explained, "Why, there are two kinds of people in America, and I told you about only one kind. There are black people and yellow people, and these ladies are the yellow kind." Now, I'm not sure who Jane Addams are. Usually I would assume that, yellow would have referred to like Asian Americans. So I'm not exactly sure what race she is, but I just thought this was a really funny story. Also, her mentioning that Americans came in black and yellow is just hella funny to me, but I thought that was just a funny story that I wanted to share. This next story is titled Ask Divorce from Englishman. So let's get into this one. Miss Gerald Fitzgerald charges her husband with cruelty. Pittsburgh, April 15th. David T. Watson of Pittsburgh, one of the best-known lawyers in the state, sailed from New York for London today, accompanied by J.V. Thompson of Uniontown, Pennsylvania, president of the First National Bank there, who is said to be very wealthy. It came out this afternoon that the two are hastening to London to take part in a divorce suit filed by Miss Gerald Fitzgerald. Oh, Gerald Fitzgerald. Okay. Formerly Miss Lydia Nicholson of Uniontown, against her husband in London. Miss Fitzgerald alleges cruelty. She sues for separation and support. The marriage of Miss Nichols and Fitzgerald years ago was romantic. They met on a train and fell in love, soon marrying. Well, she's divorcing him because apparently he's very cruel to her. And also, I just realized this was in London, but I guess these were Pittsburgh lawyers going to London. So this actually isn't an American story. It's something happening in London. But then they end it with like, they met on a train and they fell in love, soon marrying. Anyway, it's over. This last one I wanted to share is just a really, really short story. It's the shortest one that I've read, but I guess I thought it was pretty interesting as well. But this one is titled Court Lectures Subpoena Server. So, woman whom he arrested without a warrant discharged. Joseph Burke, a subpoena server who had been requested by the district attorney's office to have the police arrest Matilda Morrison, who had failed to appear after 3 subpoenas had been served on her, arrested her himself yesterday without a warrant and took her to the West Side Court. Magistrate Almond discharged the woman from custody, lectured Burke for his assumption, and told him that he thought she had cause for action for false arrest. So he just sounds pressed. Her name being Matilda, though, is so 1905. That is like so freaking progressive era coded to have the name Matilda. But I thought that was a pretty interesting one as well. Anyway, I wonder what happened to her then. I mean, if she had all these calls to appear to court, did they ever get her in court? He shouldn't have arrested her, but she just kind of, Matilda wasn't having it apparently. Anyway, thank you so much as always. Those were just a few of the stories that appeared on the April 16th, 1905, Sunday, April 16th, 1905 edition of the New York Tribune. Those are the ones that caught my eye. It was 60 pages, so trust me, there was a lot on there. Obviously, I can't read everything, but yeah, those were just some of the stories that, really caught my attention, and I hope you guys found those very interesting as well. Of course, I always try to make unhinged newspaper stories full of unhinged newspapers. I'm currently trying to find something really, really old. I found a pretty good one from like 1807, but it just wasn't enough stories. But I really want to share one day from like the 1700s or like very, very early 1800s. I'm working on that. As of right now, we've basically remained in the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. But I mean, it just is what it is so far. But yeah, I hope you guys really, really enjoyed those stories as much as I did. And I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful and blessed week moving forward. And thank you guys so much as always for your support. But yeah, I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week. And see you next time on Zay Historicizes.